Hey, welcome everyone. You're here at the Ratitude Podcast. I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Dr. Bart. I met him in Fiji, of all places, even though we're both in Florida right now. But we met in Fiji at a Tony Robbins event called Life and Wealth Mastery. And we both happened to be serving all the participants there. I was a senior leader and Dr. Bart was the medical director for all our people there. It's a really small, intimate setting. My favorite place to go in the Tony Robbins world in Fiji. And actually this morning I was catching up on my favorite TV show, Survivor, which was in Fiji. And so I have such great memories of Fiji. And one of the best memories is meeting Dr. Bart. He's a plastic surgeon, but that's just the start of what he's done. He's become a life coach, a trainer, a man of the world. He knows everything. Knows everything. And kind of part of what I've tried to do in these Ratitude podcasts is find incredible humans that are leading incredible lives and ask them, how did they get there? How did their mind evolve? So that maybe some of the people in our audience can go, that makes sense for me. That makes sense for me. Maybe I'll go this direction. Just giving people clues on how to live a Ratitude life, an astounding life, the life that you've always dreamt of because you deserve it. You're worthy. You're more than enough. And that's what we want to be able to do. So Dr. Bart, welcome to our show.
You're way too kind, Robert. Thank you so much. And they call me Dr. Rad, and so I think this is going to be a radical podcast today for sure, because your name starts with RAD as well. So
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about go back to how your mind developed. What was your upbringing? What was some of that? Because some people come from really tough situations. Some people come from more privileged situations. It's the whole gamut. It doesn't matter who you are, audience. Wherever you started, you can have an outstanding life. So Bart, how did yours develop?
Well, thank you for that, Robert. And I'm super excited to be on your show because what you're doing is so important. You're guiding us all, myself included, with new ideas, new distinctions that we can better ourselves. And that's what this is all about. And so I'm happy to share. Mine are probably, somewhat unique in that context. But the one thing that stands out, and I think you'll agree with that, is having that open mind. Being ready and open to new things, because I wasn't actually, interesting enough, when I was in my young adulthood. I was kind of really closed because I went through a rigorous training as a surgeon. I trained for 17 years. I went to medical school when I was 17 and trained for 17 years. And then, conventional medicine keeps you really tight, right? Tight in these corridors of medicine. And the real shift happened when I was introduced to the world of personal development. And I was one of those people that was super resistant. What's this all about? A coach? For God's sakes. Why would I want a coach? And I know you're an amazing coach as well. But that was the biggest, transformation that I received, because someone loved me enough to say, look, I'm going to force you to go to a Tony Robbins event. And in that environment, that's where you and I met. But I was also blessed, to be honest with you. I did grow up in 5 different countries. I speak 4 languages. And so already attuned to being very open. But I'm still, you say all these wonderful things about me, and I just think I'm just getting started. But the truth is
you went to medical school at 17?
Yes, I did.
How does that happen?
Full transparency. We do things a little differently in Europe, and so we actually start earlier. High school is more like college level compared to the United States. And so that's essentially what I did. And I was just still 17. So be honest, I was on the verge of 18. So maybe it was 18, maybe it was 17. Who knows, really? But the truth is, I was super young when I went. A great experience, 17 years of training, became a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, and recognized that it was more than plastic surgery. It's, full body, full mind, full energy transformation. And that's what I do today.
How did you decide before 17 that you wanted to become a doctor? What was your mind like? Did you play sports? Were you a book nerd? What was it that said, okay, I'm going to become a doctor?
Well, I was an instigator. I was rebellious. I was the youngest of 3. And so I think my nickname was Angel in Disguise, Devil on Wheels. But the truth is that my parents had me do an aptitude test. And, I had no clue what that was. And I just did what my parents said. And it turned out that I had only two choices. It was either becoming a vet or becoming a doctor. And I just figured, well, I like to talk, so animals won't talk back. So I better become a doctor.
Wow. Really? Okay. So then you decide you're going to become a doctor. Then you decided to become a plastic surgeon. Why? How did you make that decision?
That was a tough one, to be honest with you, because I was like a duck in water, to be honest with you. Just loved medicine, love people, love helping people, love healing people. Some of the times in Mexico that I, learned all the indigenous, healing practices, or at least the kind of downloaded on me. And so it was natural for me. And the biggest problem that I had is I was really good at everything. And so, I wanted to be, a surgeon. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist, dermatologist, all these things. So I was really good at all of it, really liked all of it, and realized I couldn't do all of it. And so I just started by exclusion. I just eliminated things that I decided, I really don't like this part and I don't like that part. It ultimately came down to surgery because it's more of a business approach. I like things to get done. And so as a surgeon, you identify a problem, you take care of it, and then you move on, whereas many of the other practices aren't. And then the ultimate plastics for two reasons: the aesthetics, really into aesthetics, as growing up, beauty and that kind of stuff. But it's plastic surgery is also an intellectual game. It's really kind of understanding what's really going on, understanding people at a higher level, and that just gravitated really well for me because love of humanity and love of beauty, but also looking to shape people's lives so that they can be happy and help them, get there. And that's why I do all the other stuff.
Now hold it. You just described plastic surgery as an intellectually above, like brain surgery.
Well, you know what it is? You have to really interpret, first of all, or interpret, what's going on a person, and to then help guide them to make the right choices. I think in plastic surgery nowadays, it's gotten out of hand. It's just like, let's do a quick procedure, quick injection. And honestly, I mean, I think it's a major disservice how people are performing it today and how people are asking for it. The reality is, my only outcome is that I want the patient to be happy. And so I start off with my patients. My only outcome is that you're happy. And so first I have to identify what needs to happen for that to happen. And so that's that intellectual game. It's exploring, it's discovering, it's being that detective and helping people understand what it is that they actually don't know, rather than just doing a quick surgery like what happens way too often. And oftentimes people aren't happy.
Wow, that's really interesting. So now you went through the 17 years of training and
Yeah.
education and practice and all that. And then you became an incredible plastic surgeon, sort of like Doc Hollywood, but you're Doc Florida. Did you see that movie?
Yes, I did. That
It's
was
a
great.
great movie.
Mm,
It's a great
yeah.
movie. Then you said somehow you came across the Tony Robbins world, and
Yeah.
someone who loved you brought you in sort of against your will.
Yeah. Well, here's how it happens, right? So late nights, come home 11, 12 o'clock, and I had to decompress. It's very intense in the emergency room and surgery and that kind of stuff. And so I just switch on the TV. And at that time, this is like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the only thing that was on TV was Home Shopping Network. And so worthwhile watching, right? And so between the Ginzu knives, this is one of my favorite stories, between the Ginzu knives and the Tupperware, there's this guy, 6'7" or whatever, big hands, big teeth, called Tony Robbins, telling me that, I need to improve my life. And that really insulted me. So I was actually very upset, annoyed by this guy because I spoke four languages. I read the Greek classics. I read all the philosophers in medical school, and I'm pretty educated, I thought. So what's this guy going to teach me? Well, I was really wrong about that, by the way. And so, as what I do, I'm going to save somebody's life. He was very grateful to me. He started showering me with all these gifts of Tony Robbins and CDs and books. And I just had no time for any of that. Basically, no time to have any personal improvement, right? Or personal growth, because I knew it all. And that wasn't out of arrogance. It was really out of ignorance, by the way. And so one day he buys me tickets, and I think we're going to a ball game, and only to find out it's Tony Robbins, one day event. And so I'm going here in a 3-piece suit and hear these people high-fiving. They're happy. Music's blaring. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong freaking place. What's wrong with me? And so I had my exit plan. I was going to go there because that's how I was. I didn't want to hurt people. I was a pleaser. I had my exit plan. It says, look, more than likely they're going to call me. So I have to be really close to the exit door. I was literally 10 seats away from it because my plan was I was going to leave in about 10 minutes. And honestly, full transparency, I have my own exit plan for my own birthday parties because, that's what I would do. I just kind of escape. Anyhow, within 10 minutes, and you know how it is, within 10 minutes, I knew my whole life was about to change because I didn't know what this world was out there. And, full potential of myself was ready to rock and roll. And I must have laughed harder, clapped more, jumped higher, screamed more than the other 1,000 people at that event. And after that, it's just history. Just dove all in, played full out, and I'm still playing full out today. I just came back from Date with Destiny, super happy to serve, people with their transformation and to serve Tony Robbins and his incredible team.
Yeah. So what was it? Because I know what it was for me in my very first event. What was it in that first event? I guess it was within that first 10 minutes that happened that caused you to open up.
Honestly, it's just his presence and the fact that he's sharing with you that there's an opportunity that somehow instinctively I knew, but I was not listening to it. I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know how to get there. It's what you don't know that makes all the difference. I mean, we always say that, right? I didn't know that this was possible. I mean, I was so stuck in the conventional medicine realm. And I'm so glad that I found this world because, I have so much that I want to give to this world in the form of health and health optimization that I would never have been able to do unless, this happened.
Yeah, yeah. So were you not happy when you got there? I mean, what was your mentality
Interesting
that
question. So
you keep saying that this transformation happened? Where were you? Because it seemed like you had a pretty good thing going on already. What was missing?
I was convincing myself that I was happy, right?
Okay.
But I didn't know what was missing, and so there seemed to be something very absent, and I didn't know what it was. And so I had achieved, a great, accomplishment. Becoming a plastic surgeon is not that easy. It's a very rigorous training in all respects, and not many people make it through. And then having a family, and then having 3 beautiful children, and all that stuff, and just realize, okay, there's something missing, and I couldn't even figure out what that was. But I certainly didn't think it was in the world of personal development because I felt pretty educated. I mean, again, not out of arrogance, it's just ignorance. That just opened a floodgate of possibility and opportunity because I just felt that I hadn't arrived yet. So after 17 years of training and now I got my practice, I mean, there has to be so much more. And the truth be told, when I was 21, I had actually made all my decisions for the rest of my life. And one of which was I was really going to focus on a work on a very large scale. But I didn't know what that was going to be like. And so that was on the back burner, obviously, for all these years in training. And so I think maybe that was one of the things that made me realize, yes, now I can pursue something that's really innate within me. And mainly because of my upbringing all over the world.
So what was the humanitarian effort, and is it something you're doing now?
When I was 19, 20, I was watching a movie about the gangs in New York. I forget the name of the movie, by the way.
Gangs of New York?
No, it wasn't that. Something else. And I felt really sorry for the guys because they're completely defranchised. They didn't get the support from their communities and everything else. And my heart went out to them and said, look, I really want to help them. And so that's kind of the vision that I had as to how I can support, humanity. But I knew that at that time that it wasn't going to be specifically that. But that was something that I could relate to in that sense. But it was going to be something big. And so the other thought that I had was to be running a large medical corporation. But it did crystallize when I went to Tony Robbins. And because for me, when I graduated medical school, I recognized that there was a major disconnect. There's a major gap between what conventional medicine was teaching us and offering us, and what people were needing. And so, and then fast forward, to about 22 years ago, 25 years ago with Tony, my mission became very, very clear. And that is to make wellness a must and accessible to all. Because I felt that people were really needing it. They were looking for it. They didn't know where to go. And there was just a lot of chaos around that. And there's still a lot of chaos around that. And I'm coming up with some solutions that will absolutely help people get immediate access to all types of healthcare solutions and that are also affordable for them. And so why not? Why not help people optimize their health on the largest scale? Not like onesies and twosies, but just on a large scale.
What did you come up with? What's happening?
So I'm keeping some of these things still in the wraps.
Okay.
Because they're being rolled out. But the reality is the focus that I have right now is very specific to this. And so most people may not quite comprehend this, but that's part of my job to begin to educate. And so my job basically as a doctor's guide, that's my brand, is to curate, educate, and guide both the consumer, which is the patient, the client, as well as my colleagues out there. But we need to do things differently. The conversation needs to be about responsibility, root cause, and data. And this is not what we're doing in conventional medicine or anywhere else. And by primarily focusing on those three things, then we can start changing the way people get access to all these healthcare solutions. And then also turn the current reactionary approach to medicine, to symptoms and disease, to one that's more proactive, but also not system-based. And so, yes, this is getting a little complicated, but the reality is that I'm creating a social media platform. I got a new podcast coming out. I got a masterclass for doctors to help them reimagine the business of medicine so they can thrive, but also deliver those solutions that conventional medicine doesn't offer. And then a really advanced brick and mortar solution, which that one's still on the wraps.
Okay. So you went to the Tony Robbins world, and
Yep.
then it turned you on. And then have you kind of continued to go to Tony Robbins events, or have you tried
Oh, yeah.
other things? How's your mind continue to evolve?
I was like a kid in a candy store when I went to Tony. And so I went full in. So I became actually a platinum member. I think you became one as well.
Yes.
And that was life changing. And then after that, I just needed more. But I went into the world of neurolinguistic programming because I really wanted to understand what that was all about. So I became a master practitioner of that. Decided not to be a trainer because that's one level. I just wanted to focus on other things. There is a program for integrated energy healing. There's 2 certified programs in the United States. One is with Barbara Brennan out of Miami, and the other one is with another group in New Mexico that I went to. So did a 4-year program on that. Actually became a coach with the Tony Robbins company. Worked with them for a while. That was amazing. And then have always stayed in the world of Tony simply because I wanted to serve. And so this year, just came back from Birmingham, England, for the Unleash the Power Within event, then Sydney in Australia, and just recently Date with Destiny, West Palm. And it's a beautiful thing to be part of the process by which people can transform their lives. It's the gift that somebody gave me once, totally against my will, like I said, and then I feel privileged that I can offer others, including the volunteers that I support.
Yeah. So what was your role there at Date with Destiny? All my friends are there. I didn't go this year because I'm actually preparing for a dance showcase on December 16th.
Oh, is that right?
I have to, like Dancing with the Stars. I got to dance every day to prepare for this thing, which is something really foreign and unique in my world. I'd never thought I'd ever try something like this, but it's kind of fun.
I have to acknowledge it, Robert. You're doing so many really cool things. I mean, if anybody's an example of living full out, that's you. I mean, I keep on seeing what you're doing on Facebook and everything else. And it's like, yeah, he's got it. He's dialed in. He's having way too much fun.
I am having way too much fun. But now, what was your role at Date with Destiny? Because it's my favorite event. It is my favorite event in the Tony Robbins world.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that because for anybody who's not aware of it, it's a 6-day event where you really get to have a date with yourself, as Tony says. And it's really finding out what motivates you, what inspires you, what holds you back. And with so many distinctions about how to become that best version of yourself, but also in relationships and the distinction. He always comes up with new distinctions out there. So anybody who's maybe done it in the past, they need to go back again to do it. because you learn so much more about yourself. It's practical. You get some experientials, and then you have a roadmap. Moving forward. What is it that you do? And so at these events, there's so many. I mean, some of the larger events have like 10,000 or 15,000, and then this one is like a 3,000 people event. And there's invariably some medical issue that shows up. And so my job as the medical lead, as I like to put it, is really make sure that I facilitate the process by which people get their own personal transformation, so that things don't get in the way. I mean, there's so much incredible content out there. You just don't want some medical issue to stop you from experiencing all of that. And so I support them in the best possible way. And so just to keep it really safe for them as well.
That's interesting, just the way you even phrase that. You're the medical lead, and the way you phrase it, and you correct me with the right words, it was something about how you just help them find their own way to have the experience that is amazing for them. You didn't say,
Yep.
I fix them up, I put Band-Aids on them, or give them some aspirin or anything like that. You said you help them figure out how to maximize their experience.
Yep. Yep.
That to me is probably what you're talking about when you talk about your own medical practice, isn't it?
It is. It is really because I will say two things is that we no longer have an excuse to be sick because all the information is out there, resources out there, all that kind of stuff. And the other part is, people have to participate in their own rescue. And this is not something that I made up. I mean, this fellow by the name of Hippocrates, about 2,500 years ago, said the same thing. He said it differently, but that's basically what it is. I mean, we have to be responsible for our own decisions. Decisions have consequences. But part of my job is to help people understand what are the better decisions that they can make for themselves, and that's curating and educating.
So here's this is a question I have for myself all the time. So I'm going to ask
Okay.
you because you're like way smarter. You speak 4 languages. You've been all over the world. You do these incredible things. You think about these things, and that is that you mentioned that people kind of know what to do. They're educated. People can take care of their health. They know what to do. So we know that there's a lot of people that even though they know, don't do what they should be doing. Now,
Yep.
I'd like to ask why, but I don't want to ask why. I want to ask, what can we do? What can you do? What can I do? What can our audience do to shift that so that people's internal dedication, drive is like, it's like turned on so that they do what they
Yep.
know already to do?
So that's a brilliant question. That's the question that I've been struggling for many, many years, which held me back from launching what I'm launching now 20
Mm.
years ago, which even now today is well ahead of its time. 20 years ago, even certainly more ahead of its time. And exactly for that reason that you just talked about, because people aren't going to move. And so, how do we get them to move? Well, again, and what's different now is that we have so much more information and we have so much more technology. So it's really two things. It's having the clarity of where you're at right now, right? What will happen if you don't change? And that there's a very affordable path forward to make the changes so that you can optimize health. And so, said differently, it's about being proactive to making sure that you stay healthy for a very long time, but also knowing what your risks are if you don't, what's likely to happen if you don't, and how to mitigate all that right now. And we really didn't have that information until about 2, 3 years ago. I mean, there's been some major shifts that have happened. Research over the last 20 years that have now come to the forefront and makes all the difference. One of which, by the way, is DNA. And there's one company out there that is just light years ahead of everyone else. It's called the DNA company, and that gives you invaluable information as to how your metabolic pathways are working or not, and how your lifestyle changes will make a difference or not. And so, whenever I work with any client, that's the first thing we do. I mean, there's no sense. And so, this is the data part, Robert. So, having that data, being able to measure things that we couldn't measure before, and also following up, because what happens, people buy all these devices and do these supplements and they fall off pretty quickly, is because they don't have any supportive data to say yes, it's working.
So even if you have that supportive data, though, there are people that aren't doing what they should be doing. What do you do about that?
Now that's a different one, right? And so that's where I would say get a coach
Okay.
because, and just as I know, and I believe this is where you're going with this, nothing changes until your identity changes. And so that's an identity issue that then needs to be addressed with a coach to understand, okay, what's holding you back?
Hmm.
What's the very specific, limiting belief? What's that block? And it has to do honestly with past trauma as well. I mean,
Yeah.
there's these identities that we've adopted for one reason or another that keeps us safe in where we are, and therefore we don't move forward in our life. And that's exactly what Tony does, right? He helps people remove those limiting beliefs to have greater beliefs to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up coach. I wasn't necessarily going that way. I just wanted to go wherever your mind took us. But my very first Tony event was actually Date with Destiny. It was
Hmm.
2014. It was the one where they filmed the Netflix documentary,
Hmm.
I'm Not Your
Right,
Guru. I'm actually in the movie
right.
like 3 times, just kind of sitting there writing. So I'm not a star or anything. But at that event, and I was just going there. It was a break between cross country and track seasons. And my cousin invited me to go. I go, sure. All I knew about Tony Robbins was he was the guy in Jack Black
Yeah,
movie Shallow Hal that
shallow house.
hypnotized him on the elevator. I go, oh, okay, that
Right.
sounds kind of cool. So I went to that. But one of many nuggets I got there was he said that high performance people have coaches. I had no idea.
Mhm.
And by the end of the 6th day, I go, I'm going to go get myself a coach, and went over to the table and said, "Hey, I'm a track coach at Pepperdine University. Give me the best coach you can." And they go, "Oh, okay, you're in the athletic world. We're going to give you the athlete coach," which turned out to be amazing. And since then, I have like 3 or 4 or 5 coaches now in particular areas of my life. My longest one, I've got a relationship coach that has been working with me for 8 years now through 4 different relationships. I think she's just brilliant. And I would not know half the stuff that I know about relationships. And I still have a long way to go. If it wasn't for that relationship coach. Now, you're a coach too. Do you have a coach?
Oh yes, absolutely.
You
Mine's a
do.
tough one. He's a Marine, and so
Okay.
he kicks my butt for sure.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, and honestly, you're such a beautiful soul, Robert. I see you relate to other people, and it's just a beautiful thing. I mean, you're an example for the rest of us. How to be able to connect with others. But another coaching group is this Sean Callaghy Unblinded group, and you're familiar with them.
I've
They're
been on his
amazing.
show 3 times.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
Yeah. Have you
great.
been
So
on his
you
show?
know.
His game
Yes,
show?
I've been on a show for sure. And so definitely, so I get coached there. And then from time to time, I get other coaches. And invariably, at any given time, I have at least 2 or 3 coaches for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So for our audience out there, that maybe some of them have never even thought of having a coach like you or I did before we didn't, right?
Right,
What
right.
would you tell those people about coaching? Because like I look at my son and I said, "Son, you need to get a coach," and he goes, "Yeah, right, Dad. I'm going to do what you do." But it would be the best thing for him. So, what would you tell someone who's listening here about coaching?
That's a really good question to ask. And I think it's a matter of, how much pain are you willing to tolerate? And if you're in pain, you know, should you have to tolerate any pain whatsoever? I mean, why would you? I mean, certainly if you got a toothache, I mean, you end up going to the dentist at some point. I mean, that one's obvious. But why deal with all the pain and suffering that we have in the world, that so many people have in the world, when it's easily transmuted into empowerment, personal power, by having somebody help you understand, how to change the perspective. Because the tools out there through coaching are just amazing. And just listening to Tony and Tony Robbins and Sage Robbins this last week, I mean, I learned some new things, and I've been in this environment for 25 years, and I'm still learning things, and it's exciting. And one of the biggest ones right now is, suffering ends when we begin to focus on others. So suffering happens when we just focus on ourselves. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so true. I'm in a relationship too, and when it's about me and I'm upset, then it's about me and I'm upset. And what I should do is just focus on her, and then the suffering's gone because you're not focusing on you anymore. And so it's things like that that are paradigm shifts in how we get to experience our lives, and it's really all about that. And so if anybody has any kind of pain, whatever that is, or any kind of frustration, that's pain, or disappointment, or sadness, or confusion, any of those, you need a coach. And for those people that are already, rocking it and high achievers and doing extremely well, I'm sure they want more. And more is a good thing too. I mean, you heard that. I mean, Sean talks about that. Everybody wants more of either money, time, or magic. And whatever, floats your boat, whatever flavor you want. And you can only get there with the right coaches.
Yeah, it's interesting. Several times during our conversation here, you've talked about sort of, or I'm reading into this, that the motivation for change is kind of pain or frustration or some kind of like a negative attribute. And
Right.
and that's interesting to me because in the world that I'm moving to, it's a different thing. That it's not that we don't even talk about that any longer. We're talking about moving towards something, and those are two different ways to be motivated. You could be moving away from something. You could be moving towards something. Talk about the distinction between those two, and is one more powerful than the other, or is it unique to an individual? Can they shift? Just what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, good point. So in the coaching world, we usually talk about a ratio between 1 to 3. So 1 pain, 2 pleasure, 3 pleasure. I'm sorry. So I mean, as we've learned, we do everything we can to avoid pain or move towards pleasure, and that ratio should be 1 to 3. Because with the pain, it's about leverage. It's about getting over inertia and then creating momentum, and then going towards pleasure, towards what you're attracted to, that keeps it sustainable. So in the world of our behavior, if you will, avoiding pain is not sustainable. I mean, it's temporary, the pain's over, and then what? So you're right, you need to have something to move forward to. But what's also interesting, Robert, is that once you begin to think of your world as to outcome based, as Malcolm Melt said, I think it was, we're cybernetic beings. We move towards targets, right? And we're mission oriented. And so the FOMO aspect of it becomes very real as well. And so as you're moving towards your pleasure and towards what great things are happening in life and to these awesome targets, then sometimes that fear of missing out by not doing the work is also very motivating at the same time. And so that dynamic, I don't know exactly how that fits, but in general, right, we move quickly when we're in pain, and we can sustain it because we're experiencing the benefits of it right now. And I think experiencing the benefits is the key, because it's more about who are you becoming, who are you being versus who you are doing. And I think that's a key distinction.
What about if someone's at a 2? They're kind of right in between. They don't have any pains, not really stressed. They're just kind of cruising through life. They don't have real high highs. They're just kind of in the middle. What do you do with those folks? How do you motivate them?
And that's the danger zone. That's complacency, and it's like crack, and people like to stay there. And the problem is that what's inevitable in life are problems. Suffering is a choice, but problems are going to happen. Change is going to happen. Progress is not. It's invariably what happens. Even in that place of complacency, just like many people were in 2019 before the whole pandemic hit, they weren't ready for a major upset, a major turmoil. And turmoils will happen. And so in essence, we have to prepare ourselves. And so that's where that person with, foresight, looking towards the future. And that's the one thing that we have to help people understand, that, nothing is permanent. Everything's going to change. And so be prepared for your future, because that pain will be inevitable unless you're prepared for it. And so that's the only thing. And so, people who are ready to listen to that, great. And those that are not, well, they're going to have to learn the hard way.
Yeah. So, what are you doing for yourself right now? What are you doing for yourself to evolve, to continue to grow, to find more happiness? What's Bart doing?
I just get excited when I serve humanity. I mean, that's my sweet spot. Some people might find that corny. I just get teary eyed and emotional when I can see the impact that I can have on people, and for me, that's where I'm at. Constantly right now. My new podcast series that's coming out. This can be super fun, and it's sharing health optimizing in a different manner, getting access to new technologies that can diagnose things in instantly without pinpricks, without blood draws, without any crazy tests or x-rays, that kind of stuff. And so my job is understanding and curating all these amazing products out there, and opportunities out there, and bringing it together so that people have access to it. See, that's the big problem today, is that people just don't know where to go to get access to health optimizing. And I'm just totally going to change that. And so that's what's really exciting for me. And that's the journey that I basically started, as soon as I graduated from medical school.
Yeah. So, in Tony's latest book, he talks about a facility called Fountain Life.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're how familiar you are. Maybe you're on their board. Maybe you're involved. I don't know. I'm actually a member of Fountain Life here in Naples. For this is my second year doing it. Are you involved?
Actually, I'm not. And the truth of the matter is, there's so many programs out there. It's worthwhile to be part of any of those programs, but never limit yourself to one program. And that's again something that I'm looking to change. I'm looking to incorporate all of it versus limited. I think that's the big danger for many of these companies and organizations, is that they're very limited. But because of my approach, because of my innovative model, I can do things differently, and I can incorporate all of that versus limiting myself to just certain things.
Yeah, that's really great because a few friends of mine have read the book or just talked to me. No, I'm doing this, and they check into it and they go, "Oh, this is way too expensive for me." But I like what you just said, that there's a lot of different options. So for our audience there that wants something like this, and maybe we should describe what it is Fountain Life in particular. They do a series of diagnostic testing with you initially, and then they have an AI computer that does 4.3 trillion calculations after all these body scans. It's like being at Star Trek. And I think there's 11 different machines that are, and then it spits out these answers going like, this is the highest probability of the way you're going to die. And now let's figure out a strategy for longevity so that you don't die that way, or you die that way a long time from now. And it's really kind of a cool process, but it's not cheap. Are there alternatives, and are there some places where you could suggest our audience that might be interested in longevity and greater health might pursue?
One of the terms I like to use, and I'm kind of playing with it and see how the listeners and public, respond to that. For some people, this is a bit of a charged word, but it's not really. And what I shared earlier, is making wellness the most accessible to all, has turned into democratizing both the delivery and access to all types of health solutions that anyone can afford. And so a different focus. And so that's part of what it is that I do. And if people want to find out more, they just have to go to my website, and that is Dr. Rademaker. So DrRademaker. There's a ton of information there. They can click on the link that says Global Impact, and and that's where I'll be presenting all these things. But just imagine, this is what I envisioned 20 years ago, Robert. Imagine you go to a certain place, within 10 minutes, they have a full diagnostic workup, with no pinpricks, no blood draw, nothing like that. But within 10 minutes, a complete workup, and then a roadmap to move forward. That's what I envisioned, 20 years ago. That's what I have right now.
That's
And that,
possible right now?
yeah, absolutely. And
Wow.
so that's exactly what I'm launching now. We're in here in the United States, we're in that beta phase with that. But it's a complete game changer, because now, and that's why I use the word responsibility. Who's responsible for what now? And now we're able to give the individual the responsibility and accountability to understand what needs to be done and how to do it, and what their finances are going to allow. And there are so many options out there that people can do, but it means that what really matters is that we got the data to follow up, because there's so many amazing devices out there, and so many devices that aren't, right? But also with these amazing devices, it's also context dependent. So one device may work perfectly for you, but not for the next person, and they still have the same problem. And that's why we incorporate the approach with the other aspects, what I do with the DNA and everything else. And so we've got a clear pathway what can happen and how to make that happen moving forward. And it's super affordable, Robert. I mean, you don't have see where people go wrong is they believe they have to spend all this money to be healthy. And all you need to have is the right roadmap.
Yeah. So, and all that information is on your website.
So yes, as much as I'm ready to offer at this point,
Okay.
as far as what that exactly looks like, because
Okay.
we're ready to do a major investment round for next year to get that out there. But certainly, if people are interested, they could reach out. They can contact me, and we can actually do some of those assessments starting January 1st.
Very cool. So now this show will broadcast on or about that day, but we will put your link on how to get a hold of you in the write up for this podcast, for this show, so anyone out there will be able to reach you. Is there any other final things that you'd like to share with our audience? Because we're both Coach Rad, we're Living
right.
Rad, and how can what's one nugget you could say on how to go live rad?
So I actually have my TikTok, which is my handle is Dr. Rad. And the fun part, the radical part is that I say it's super easy to be healthy. And it really is. So what's radical about our health, it's actually really easy to access. You just need to know how. And that is my mission. That is my passion, to help people understand what's worthwhile, what's not. And my podcast, which is coming up, which is called The Doctor's Guide, it's really and I'm not selling a product or a service or a person, but I'm sharing the process by which people can better navigate their own health, which is something nobody else is doing.
How do we find your podcast?
So check out my website, Dr. Rademaker, because I'm launching it next week.
Okay.
Or the week after. And you know how it is with podcasts. It's a lot of work, a lot of things have to come to play. And just check out my website, drrademaker.com. It's a beautiful website. It's about knowing what to do so you can be super healthy. And everybody has that option and choice right now. And it's affordable. And you don't have to waste your money.
Well, I'm going to check it out. Thank you, Dr. Bart Rademaker, for being here on our podcast. It's such a pleasure and honor. I look forward to seeing you someplace in the future as we're both living rad.
And I want to thank you, Robert, because you're an amazing soul. And you are an example of how we can have a radically beautiful life in all of its dimensions. So I thank you.